the right land they came down here speculating for oil. Right, so they didn't get any oil, but they got this land. And he came up with the idea, Acres Home, he got the land in Acres Home and Independence Heights. But what he did, he set up a separate finance company, mortgage company, play with finance, nothing but black folks. They didn't have no money, but he made it available where they could pay for this land. And most of the people built their own homes. My name is Alfred Ronald McCullough Sr. I am a fourth generation McCullough from the Arthur McCullough, Ed McCullough, with my father and grandfather.
And my name is Alfred Ronald McCullough Jr. I was named for my father, but most of the people in my family call me either son or Little Ronnie and so forth. My mom was Yvonne McCullough, and obviously my dad is Alfred McCullough Sr.
Who is Jack Yates, man?
Jack Yates was he was a preacher. He was a former slave, and he had his freedom, but he chose to go back to Virginia, back in slavery, so he could bring his family to Houston. And when he came, he was self-educated, but he was educated, and he was one of the first black pastors, black teachers in Houston. His name wasn't Jack; it was John.
John Yates.
John Yates, yeah.
And what was his relationship to the McCullough family?
His granddaughter. He and Danny McCullough's daddy were friends. And because Nanny Vice said that was the meanest man she ever met. He taught her. And that was Danny McCullough's sister. He taught her. But his granddaughter, Rutherford Yates' daughter, Olee, married Daddy's brother, Uncle Arthur McCullough. And that's how
Was Jack Yates and Jim McCullough, were they contemporaries?
Yes. Yes, they were contemporaries.
There's only a freeway, the 610 freeway, that separates Independence Heights from the historic Heights, because that's the way the city was divided, kind of sidetracking. The city was divided into heights and into wards. You had first ward, second ward, third ward, fourth ward, fifth ward, and the sixth ward. And then you had heights. People, when you say heights in Houston, they generally think of the historic heights, the Houston Heights, which is at one point was one of the wealthiest areas. That's why the Houston elite lived before the turn of the 20th century. Back then, it wasn't Independence Heights wasn't a wealthy community, but it was self-contained. Everything you needed was there.
Over 40 merchants out there. They had the lumber yard. They had dressmakers. They had Mr. Canada was the what you call him? He was a tailor. And in Mr. Canada's place, he had an ice cream parlor and cleaning and pressing. and he did it somewhere. Now the house, it's still there behind True Light on the corner of Macomb and 31st.
Oh, yeah.
That was his home.
Oh, okay.
And Miss Canada, they must have been from out of the country because they were just, unless they came from Louisiana, but they spoke. Miss Canada was darker than you, but her hair was coal black and long. She was a pretty, and they had one daughter.
So Houston was less than 50 years old when James McCullough bought that property. Now there's, on the deed itself, it says James McCullough, F.M.O.C. And man, I racked my brains for 3 days trying to figure out what the hell is FMOC. And then it dawned on me, free man of color. So I honestly believe, even though all men at that particular time were free men of color, but it was like a badge of honor that he wore when he put that in. Now he couldn't read or write, and I saw on the deeds on the property where I have, where he made his X on there.
There were occasions when some whites would come through there in cars and people walking to church, they would strike them or hit them with something, and other than that. And when we were able to catch them going down North Main, because on the other side of the track, further down on Cross Timbers, that's where whites live. But they used to come down North Main. And when we would catch them, we would run them out of there over by the park. And one white guy it was a trail over a ditch, and it was a slim bridge, and he tried to ride his bike across that. But he fell in there. And, he didn't have a good time after that particular time.
His wife couldn't read or write. Now, that was Sally McCullough. Sally McCullough was an ex-slave from your neck of the woods, from Atlanta, Georgia. And as the story goes, she was married to another man when he met her, and he was supposed to have killed this cat in a duel and brought her back to Houston. And they had 7 children. My great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, was Jim McCullough's son, Arthur McCullough. Arthur McCullough had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls. Uncle Arthur, Uncle Jim McCullough, my grandfather, Ed McCullough. Then he had Sally, and then Hester, and then Loda. Loda is the last one that's living of that group, and that's who I want you to meet. And she's right down the street from Daddy.
Okay, my name is Loda Elizabeth McCullough Charles, and my dad was Reverend Arthur McCullough, and he organized the Salem Baptist Church, which is right down the street there, and he had 6 children, 3 boys and 3 girls, and I'm the baby. I was the baby, and all of them are dead but me. I'm still here. I'm still hanging in here. I'm 85 years old, and I'm so grateful and thankful to the Lord to let me live to be this old.
Studewood stopped at 30th Street, and 30th Street going back toward town, that was all whites. And then we had football games with some of the white boys in that particular area. They would come down to our park, and if they beat us, we'd run them back over in their area, and vice versa. If we went down there and played football with them, if we beat them, they would run us back to Studewood. But it was Independent Heights. It was a long time, and I remember my grandfather telling us about when times were really bad, I guess it was in the 20s, is that the whites decided that they were going to come down and tear up Independent Heights. They used the N-word, that's the N-town. And a man named Mr. Kelly and a couple of other old timers went down there and told them that if you cross this ditch, which was 30th, which divided the neighborhoods, we got men all down in that ditch with shotguns, and so if you cross this line, it's a lot of you not going to go back. and they eventually turned around. And I think he told me.
After they shot at him.
Yeah, but they shot him. After they did that, after all of that, there was only about 10 black people in the ditch. But it was enough to turn them around.
Tell us a little bit more about like Salem.
Salem at the church.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, well, it started out, my daddy went and organized. He did belong to Antioch and Bethel in 4th Ward when he and my mama married. But they moved out here in the Independent Heights. Everybody called it Studewood because when we were going, like I was going to Booker T. Washington, that's where I finished from. It was in 4th Ward. And so we rode the Studewood bus. So everybody recognized the children, they say it's Studewood, but actually it is the Independence Heights.
Here in Houston, integration basically took place overnight. It wasn't a lot of fanfare, and Daddy can tell you about there were a group of businessmen, black men, white men in this group, and whenever they wanted to do something, they would get together and they would meet, and it happened. They were very powerful men. Judge Roy Hawthines, who was instrumental in getting the Astrodome built. Daddy talked about him last night. He was the county judge here in Harris County. Very powerful man. And Judge Hawthines was a member of that group. And so they decided that Houston was going to integrate, and it happened. No fanfare, no ruckus or anything. It just happened. We had a few riots here. One over at TSU, you had the incident there. I think that was in about 66, 67, if memory serves me correctly. And then you had another one where the Black Panthers were attacked on Lion Street, where we were talking about the Park Theater and all of that. You had that incident there. But it wasn't that bad, you know what I mean? And as a child, you didn't know any different. That's all you knew, you know. And there were instances where you didn't feel comfortable doing certain things, and you basically knew your place. You knew what not to do.
Oh, we got used to it. It didn't bother me so much. Ed was instrumental, and he worked in the civic club in this community. And he was he the president when
Yeah, he was the first president.
First president. And so the Studewood bus, first we used to ride the streetcar. Yeah. And the streetcar would turn right where 610 now. But that would be, it was 30th Street. And that was the Independent Heights. The blacks lived from 30th on back to across the track, about 38th, 30th, 40th Street, or somewhere over there. But we had to pass all the white schools to go to Booker Washington, Yates, or Wheatley. There's only 3 black high schools in Houston. Booker T. Washington, Jack Yates, and Phyllis Wheatley. And that's where Ronnie went. He's the only one that went to Yates. And my sister, all of them, and brothers, they all went to Booker T. Washington.
Houston was unique from what I understand about other major southern cities. You know, it wasn't as bad here as it was in Alabama, Mississippi, and other southern states, because we're on the cusp of the South. You know, here, this region that we're in is the Gulf Coast region, and that's not to say there wasn't segregation here, but it wasn't as bad as other places. And it's different. Texas is basically divided into 5 sections. You have the north section up north by Dallas. That's kind of plains-like and so forth. Then you had East Texas. East Texas was truly southern. That's where the plantations were and all of that. And you find a heavy concentration of black people in that area.
On the 4th of July, everybody would have their tables and bring their food and everything. Everybody brought their goodies with them. And we would go in the church and have church. Some of we go in there, and if I go in there to play piano on the first day we come, and the old folks, they would just come on and gather around. We was having church on the 4th of July at the church. And
I think we
Yeah,
need
we
to
had
bring
that.
that back.
The first medical clinic was at Salem.
they had it at Salem. I
First
was trying to
precinct,
see, I
voting
think I had a
precinct
book
was
here
at
with a
Salem.
picture of our old church, old frame church, but when we built this, Daddy didn't live to see this church. Mama did. Mama lived to see the new church that we have. But Daddy, he paid the first $100. He wasn't on no salary. Daddy was whatever the church would give him. That's all, because it was just back in that day, folks. You know, if you gave a quarter in church, you was doing good. You know, you had to be able to give a quarter, folks. As you know, and we used to have. He would take the children after a while. We had quite a number of children grew up in Salem,
Laverne.
and every year we would go to the association, Sunday school congress,
Yeah.
and we'd take the children, but we always took up a penny, just a penny offering. And we was able to take children to, most of them was up in Beaumont. Most of the times we would go to Beaumont. And when the children, they got a kick out of that. It was really nice. And then I played for the choir. Sometimes if Daddy was going to preach, I had someone, the choir would go up there. We went to
Color girls.
yeah, my sisters. I wasn't in the group singing, but I played. Sally Hester and Marie was Cat-Cat's only daughter, so they called them the McCullough Trio.